Hello, my name is Joshua Mason, and this is my testimony. I grew up in a home where Christ was never mentioned. I grew up in a home that was full of abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. My mother and father were divorced when I was 4 years old, and my brother went to live with my father, and I went to live with my mom. And my mom met and married the man that would become our abuser. The abuse took place with fists, with belts, with boards, really whatever was available at the time. We would have bruises from our shoulders to our ankles, and it would become almost a running thing where my mother would check us before we would leave the house. And she would say, if you're not wearing a shirt, you need to check your back to make sure the bruises aren't visible, because if the neighbors see them, they may call CPS, and if they call CPS, you're gonna go to a place that's much worse than here. And so we always thought about that, and we thought, if there's someplace worse than here, we definitely don't wanna go there. Fast forward to my mom getting pregnant, and my mother and father are gonna have a baby, and they have the name picked out, Lucas Wayne Morrison, and they're excited. And so my mom has the baby, and life is a little bit better in our home. And we're at my grandma's one night, and my little brother's about 3 months old. My mom laid my little brother down, and about 15 minutes later, she went back in. And she came out screaming, my baby's dead, my baby's dead. And I learned at that time that that was SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And so my little brother had passed away from that, and that led to my mother becoming very distant from us. And as a kid, I didn't understand that, and I didn't understand why she was drinking a lot and crying all the time. And I had some animosity towards my mom when that happened, and I was confused about why she was so distant. I really didn't care if life ended at that time for me. And I had gotten to the point where I had started standing up against my father. I had started talking back and being pretty disrespectful and saying that, he would beat us, and I would say that didn't hurt, or I would say, what do you want me to do, cry? And my mom pulls me out of the room and says, hey, I'm gonna ask you a question, and if you answer yes, you can never come back. Of course, I started crying, and I didn't know what she was talking about, and she pulled an airplane ticket out of her purse, and she said, listen, this is a flight to your father who lives in Kansas City. If you take this, you can never come back. I had only met my father one time up until that point. So I took her up on that offer, and I flew to my dad's house. It was a complete 180. I mean, life was good. I moved into a home where my father loved me. My real brother, Jeremiah, was very popular in school, and I got into athletics, and just life was going good. I excelled at school. I ended up getting a full ride to college, and I went to college, and like I said, life was good, and I started my first job at Gold's Gym, and I met my fiance, and she got pregnant, and I was expecting my first daughter, and I was excited, but also I was somewhat terrified because of what happened to my little brother, Lucas. We have the baby, and her name's Lauren Brooke Mason. And life is good, I have a good job, we move along, and I'm taking care of the baby, and my fiance works nights. We come to the night where I hand my daughter off, and so I give her my daughter, and I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning. I hear my stepdaughter say, Mommy, you're laying on the baby. And I immediately jumped up, and I walked down the hallway, and as I turn the corner, I see my fiance in the chair, and I can see my daughter's wedged in between her and the chair, and I run over there, and I pull my daughter out, but I immediately realized that she's dead. We buried my daughter, and I was very depressed and very suicidal at that time, and very I didn't know what I was gonna do, and I didn't know where I was gonna go, but I knew that me and her couldn't stay together. And so we split up, and I moved back home, and I moved in with my father. And so I had a lot of resentment to God, and I thought that he had killed my daughter. because he let it happen. And he knows everything, knows all. So I really carried that hate with me, that resentment with me. And I didn't know God at the time, but I believed enough to know that, or in my mind, I thought if I committed suicide, then I couldn't go to heaven. So I knew I wanted to see my daughter again. And I'm a big believer that now that God puts people in your lives, you know, he specifically places important people in your lives, and you just have to recognize that. And I say that because I moved back in with my father, and this is 4 months after it happened, and I'm trying to make sense of things. And I meet this guy, Garrick, and I meet him and his wife, and they own this gym, and I decided to take the job, and it gets me out of my phase of depression, and I'm kind of back on my feet again, and I'm doing well, and I feel good, and, you know, I just lose myself in the work. I started at the gym, and the gym ended up closing down, and they ended up leaving town and moving to Texas, and I ended up doing some other construction jobs and whatnot. But I run into, or I meet a woman who, at that time, I intended to marry, and I'm back in a relationship again, and I feel good, and I feel confident. And a year goes by, and I get a phone call from Garrick out of nowhere in Texas, and he says, hey, I'm at this huge gym in the Woodlands. It's the Legend Sports Complex. It's one of the largest in the country. We're going to pay you a ton of money. Move down here. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to take that job, and maybe I'll just go by myself. Me and that girl were together, but it was working out. Wasn't really working out per se. So I tell her that I'm going to move to Texas on my own, and she tells me she's pregnant. And I immediately, of course, went into shock, because the one thing I don't ever want to do again is have a child. I don't ever want to risk going through that again, or going through that trauma for anything in the world. I called Garrick back, and I say, listen, I'm going to have a baby, and 9 months from now, the gym's still being built, so 9 months from now, we'll have the baby. I'll wait 6 weeks, and I'll take the job. So we're going to have this little girl, and her name's going to be Ariana. And so we have Ariana, and we moved to Texas, and life is amazing. Life is great, except for the fact that I can't eat, I can't sleep. I'm a nervous wreck, because every night I go to sleep, and I don't know what's going to happen in the morning. And of course, I'm a pain again. You don't fall asleep with the baby, don't do this, don't do that. Now, in my mind, I have to make it to 3 months with this baby girl, because my little brother, 2 months, 27 days. My daughter, 2 months, 28 days. So I have to make it to 30 days for life to be okay with Ariana, right? And that's my only goal in life. And so we're in Texas, and we're doing good, and her mother comes into town to visit, and I go to work, and I tell her just to pick me up at 12 o'clock. This 2 months and 28 days into this. I only have 2 more days left to meet this major milestone, I believe, mentally in my life. And she drops me off, and I get off at midnight, and I make that phone call. I call her, hey, come get me, no answer. And so I call again, no answer. And then I start to get worried. I don't have a car. She has the only car, and she's got to come get me. And so I wait, and I call numerous times over the next hour, and it's going on 1 o'clock in the morning. And so I call Garrick, and I say, hey, something's not quite right. She's not answering the phone, and that's definitely not like her, and she's supposed to pick me up. Can you come and pick me up and take me home? And so he comes and gets me, and we drive to my townhome, and I look up, and all the lights are off in the house, and I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm just a mess at that point. And I walk up the stairs, and I open the door, and everything in my home is gone. Not a single thing left in my house, but a couch and a note on the edge of that couch. And I yell at Garrick, and I tell him to come up, and I'm freaking out because, 2 days, 2 days is all I had to make it. And the note says, you know what, I miss home. I don't like the big city life. I want to go back and live with my mom in South Carolina. It was devastating to me, and for the fact that I knew that things would never be the same, and in my mind, I felt like I had just lost my second daughter in a row. And so at that moment, I made the decision. I said, I'm going to self-destruct. I'm just going to completely self-destruct. And I don't care whether I live or die or I make it to, I don't really care about anything anymore, period. I'm doing drugs. I started taking pain pills and somas and Xanax to kind of relieve the stress, and those were all prescribed at first. I walked by my roommate's room one day, and he's about to shoot methamphetamines into his arm out of a needle. So I tried meth that night, and I immediately was hooked, and that led to an 8-year addiction battle with methamphetamines. And about 3 years into that addiction, I met a woman who would become my wife, who would become the inspiration, and who would ultimately change my life. And she was a very religious woman, right? I fell in love with her at first because of that, but also because she had her stuff together, and I was a drug addict. And I was hopeless, and that's how she met me. Our relationship developed and moved quickly, and within a year, her parents had came down, and her parents were like, "You're not living at my daughter's house unless you're married to her." I was very nervous and put on a pair of shorts and sandals and a tank top and went to the courthouse and married his daughter because that was what was mandatory to continue living in that home. Keep in mind, this is 3 years into my addiction. As I mentioned, 8 years. I was addicted to drugs, almost 9, but this is 3 years into it. And now my wife is slowly mentioning God and how good God is, and I'm coming back to her with, he took everything from me, No, you don't understand. God is gonna save you. You need to completely surrender to God. You need to surrender yourself over to Him. Surrender yourself over to Him. And I kept hearing her, and eventually I really heard her, and I started going to church with her. And the pastor said something one night that really stuck out to me, and I didn't know anything about the Bible or verses or any of God's word at that time, but he said the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Wait a minute, so I'm blaming God this whole time, but it wasn't God, kill, steal, destroy. It was the devil. Once I heard that, it had a huge effect on me, and all my blame and my anger through God was transferred onto the devil. That overwhelming forgiveness that I had to God, and how I realized how confused I was, it was just such a transformational moment in my life and in my walk with God. At this point in time, I had no teeth. I had lost all my teeth from the meth addiction. Been arrested countless times, on petty stuff, silly stuff, but nevertheless, my future wasn't looking too bright, even if I got sober. But she's still hammering away. God will do amazing things in your life, but you have to completely surrender. And now, to completely surrender, I knew that meant walking away from drugs completely. Now, I did that through a verse that I had read as I was studying on my own, and it was Ephesians 6:13. And to this day, I have this little pin here that I wear everywhere on all my suits, and it's Ephesians 6:13. Put on God's armor so that you may stand against the deceitful ways of the devil. And so, Ephesians 6:13, I put on God's armor, and I stopped doing methamphetamines that night, and stopped doing opiates and cold turkey, and I just quit. And the next day I woke up and thought, where do I go from here though? Because I still have no teeth. My life's a mess. Just because I've surrendered myself to God, and I'm looking forward to a future, and looking forward to walking on this path full of faith. mentally, I have to wrap my head around, I've got to get it together. Somehow, I've got to make this happen. Well, what I know and what I learned and what my wife helped me understand is that I don't have to do anything. God has got it under control. So I'm going to leave it up to him. Fast forward till we start looking into dentists. And first dentist says, absolutely, we can help you get your smile back. No problem. It's going to be $65,000. And that number is just that's just not going to happen. I mean, that's just can't even imagine that number. I think we had about $8,000 in the bank at the time to really start this new venture of me becoming successful again. And so that was the first dentist, and that was kind of dissuading. And we went to the second one, and the price came down to $55,000, and nobody was under $40,000. Not even for dentures. Dentures were $32,000. And at that moment, I had kind of gotten down a little bit, and I started really praying to God, and I had surrendered myself to. I told him, I said, God, I surrendered myself to you. I've stopped doing the drugs. And me and my wife sat down and we said, look, we just have to really pray about it because we know that this is the path I'm supposed to be on. And we did that. We prayed most of the day. And during this time, I get a text message from Garrick. And so Garrick's the guy I remember from 8 years back that I had ran the big gym for. I get a text from Garrick out of nowhere saying, hey, I'm at this gym now and I need somebody to come and run the sales department. I saw your Facebook and I see you're doing better. You look sober. I'd like to offer you the job. And so, I mean, you want to talk about God moments. I had the biggest smile on my face that I've ever had, no teeth and all. I had a huge smile on my face, right? And I don't tell my wife yet because I'm thinking, this is it. Surrendered myself to God. I prayed. I've been steadfast in my walk of faith. And I get this message out of nowhere after 9 years of no communication. And this message means that I could end up being exactly where I was the moment before I decided to self-destruct. And so how amazing is that? And so I text Garrick back, hey, I appreciate the message. I would love to take that opportunity. I have a small dental procedure that I have to take care of before I can do that. And when I do that, I'll get right back with you. Now, I don't know where am I gonna get teeth from? 50,000 here, 60,000 there. I don't know, but I know that I'm not saying no to that offer, and I know that God has me on this walk, and he's gonna show me the way. That night, I was looking online, and I had ran across this ad that was 1-800-dental or 1-800, it was affordable teeth, whatever it was. I came across that ad. I ran in the room, woke my wife up. Look at this, it says 5,000 down. You can put 5,000 down and you can make payments. Well, we had already been denied to be able to make payments at several places because, of course, the credit's not good. 8 years, drug addiction, credit's terrible. That just comes with it. But we're gonna just pray about it and we're gonna go that next day. So we showed up to that dentist and we sat down with them, and it started out like every other dentist. We did the x-rays and we talked and we went back to the finance department. And they asked me to tell them a little bit about myself or my story or what I was even there for. So I explained almost everything of what I just told you. And they kind of sat back for a minute, thought about it. Then they went into the other room and they said, give us a moment. I started telling my wife, hey, get your stuff. Let's get ready and go. This is never going to happen, right? And they come back in the room and they say, this is a Thursday, keep in mind. They say, why don't you show up on Monday? We're gonna take all your teeth out the first half of the day. And then afternoon, around 1 o'clock that same day, we're gonna put your new teeth in. It's gonna be all done in the same day. And I'm waiting for the catch, like, wait a minute, hold on, because we only have this amount of money in the bank. and they said, here's your piece of paper. I need you to sign here and fill this out. So they handed me the piece of paper, and that piece of paper said total $9,000. And so talk about a God moment. They had, you can do the math, several thousands of dollars had been reduced because, in their words, they wanted to be a part of my journey. And all I had to do was check back in with them at a later date and tell them how it was going. And so the power of prayer, I've come to learn, is a very, very real thing. And it's an amazing thing. Things are going according to plan. And Monday I go in, they take all 20-something teeth out. They put my new teeth in. And now, as you can see, I can smile. But most importantly, I can make it to that job interview. And so you can see that God had all this planned out way before I even knew that all this was going to happen. And I go to that job interview, stitches still all through my mouth. I'm talking to Garrick and I'm slurring every word. I could barely say anything, and he's looking at me kind of crazy, but I'm telling them the whole story and basically my whole testimony. And he says, that's amazing, and so glad to see you again and see that you're back and that you're yourself, and I want to give you the job. Now I'm sober. I have a big, beautiful smile in my mind. I have my career back, all thanks to God and the power of prayer. You might think after all that, that's the end of the story. However, God has different plans. And God wasn't quite done with me yet. And as I know, God is never quite done with any of us. But Garrick ended up leaving the gym out of nowhere. And it was kind of surprising that he did leave. He ended up going to this place called the Dream Center. And now this place was some type of ministry place, or I don't know. Garrick, as I came to find out, at the gym many years back, Garrick wasn't the same Garrick that I had met when I got this new job. He was very into faith, almost like my wife, just always talking about the Lord and how good God was. And he was so excited that I was on my walk, but it was a completely different Garrick than the Garrick that I knew. Let me just say that. And so he's full-time ministry and saying all this other stuff. And so he goes over there, and I'm like, okay, well, that's his walk. He's going over there to be in full-time ministry and to give back. I kept having this nagging itch that it's so amazing that what God did for me, and there's got to be something more that I could be doing to give back. You only have so much time, right? And so what can I be doing to help others, to spread the joy that he has given me, this walk? What can I do? How can I do more? Garrett calls me out of nowhere and says, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if you came over here and worked with me at the Dream Center? You know, we have an opening for someone to run the nonprofit side, the donation side. And I didn't even want to tell my wife, because I already know what my wife's going to say. She's going to say, I told you how good God is. This is where you're supposed to be. But I'm at the top. I'm at the height of my career. I'm in the Woodlands. I'm running a gym. I'm the operations manager. I'm respected. I'm well paid. I'm loved. And I'm doing what I love to do. I'm right back in it, right? And so I took that job at the Dream Center. And now, after everything that has happened, I'm now at the Dream Center in a full-time ministry. And each and every day I wake up and I'm able to share God's word with people. I'm able to share my testimony with countless people throughout the week, and I'm able to inspire and bring joy to others. And this is what I do full time. And so I just couldn't be happier, and I couldn't be more grateful. And I just can't say enough about how good God is, how the power of prayer is oh so real, and how much he's done for me. And Joshua Mason, and that's my testimony.